Good afternoon. This is the sermon for August, I believe it's 9th, but I'll be honest, I can't remember if I have the right day or not. I know I have the right text, which is Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 36. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, and the wind was against them. And early in the morning, he came walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost." And immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking to the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those of the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." When they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret. After the people of that place recognized him, they sent word throughout the region and brought all who were sick to him, and begged him that they might touch even the fringe of his cloak. And all who touched it were healed. The Gospel of the Lord. Please join me in prayer. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. There are a number of wonderful songs that we associate with this gospel reading. Eternal Father, Strong to Save, which is the hymn of the U.S. Navy. You who have come down to the lakeshore. These are some of the hymns that I will include links to when I send this out. This gospel reading is remarkable to me for a few reasons that I'm going to touch on briefly, and then what I'm going to talk about in the major portion of my sermon. First off, we have Jesus kind of as administrator, as organizer. He sends the disciples onward so that he can dismiss the crowds. He is the one who is spending, who says, "I'm going to do this. You guys go on ahead." Now, it could be that he expects them to go on ahead to take care of the people in Gennesaret. It could be that he's expected. He is delegating responsibility. And the disciples, as they always seem to, mess it up. We also get some of that very human side of Jesus. Again, Jesus goes up the mountain to pray. Again, he is taking time. He is taking Sabbath. This has happened particularly often after the death of John the Baptist. But we get a sense of someone who is saying, "You know what? I need to rest. I need to take a moment." One of the things that my daughter will do sometimes is cross her arms like this and say, "I need to take a moment. I need to take a moment." Jesus recognizes this very human need that we have from time to time, and that at points, each and every one of us needs to take a moment. At the same time, Jesus is walking on the water, which is not a very human thing to do unless it's been below freezing for a while and that water is turned to ice. Even then, it's treacherous. No, Jesus is walking on the waters of a storm-tossed sea, swaying to and fro. This is not something that I can relate to. This is not something that you can relate to, because this is something of God. It reminds us that Jesus is both the Son of humanity and the Son of God. It reminds us that Jesus might be like us in our worries and our weaknesses and our need to take a moment, and that Jesus can do things that, quite frankly, seem incomprehensible to us. Although even there, they might not be. The disciples are out on a boat. They are on the sea, and we are told that the wind is against them. For the Jewish people, throughout both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, the seas are seen as this incomprehensible place of chaos and storm and wind and worry. It is to the seas that God speaks. It is to those storm-tossed seas that God speaks in the beginning of Genesis and brings order out of chaos, brings something out of nothing. The Jewish people were a landlocked people. They were predominantly living in the hillsides. They were living, or not in the hillsides, on the hillsides. They're living in the hill country of Judah and Ephraim and Benjamin. The strongest points of the countries of Israel and Judah were away from the seas, because the Jewish people were not naturally a seafaring people. They were a people who were more comfortable on the land. I'm of Germanic heritage. I am sure that is true of my ancestors as well. And the disciples were out on the sea, were out in this place of uncertainty, in some ways of unfamiliarity. They were out on the Sea of Galilee, which is, it's a big lake. And they were there, and they had no control of their surroundings. And they were terrified. And they had no way to direct their boat, no way to get it to where they were going. And they were worried that the winds, which must have been incredibly fierce, were going to drown them. When suddenly they see Jesus walking across waters as the boat is heaving and going to and fro. And they said, "It is a ghost." And Jesus reminded them that it wasn't. And he calls to Peter and he says to Peter, "Come." And Peter does one of the most remarkable acts of faith in the entire gospel. He gets out of the boat. He starts trying to walk on the water. And initially he does. Initially, listening to the command of Jesus, he is going out on that unsteady sea. But he notices the wind and the rain. He notices the heaving. He notices the storm water come crashing down. There could be thunder and lightning, who knows? He notices all of the elements of the storm, and he begins to sink, and he is scared. We are told that immediately Jesus is there. I like to imagine that as this happens, that Jesus instantly goes from one place to another. That instantly he goes from where he called to Peter, and that he is immediately there, able to pull him up. That there is no time required for Jesus to cross from one distance to the other. I like to imagine this because the text makes it clear the immediacy of Jesus' return to Peter. I've been thinking about this text in relation to a few things. I've been thinking about it in relation to our needs, to at times take a moment, our needs at times to take Sabbath. I know that some of the way that I process stress is by not sleeping and pacing in the middle of the night. And I know that I have much more often over the last 5 months not slept and paced and worried in the middle of the night. And I know that I have had to work hard to remind myself to slow down, to be calm, to pray. I know that taking a moment, which is something that Jesus did, is something that each and every one of us needs to do from time to time. I know, thinking about this text, I resonated with the disciples. I resonated with being on the sea. I resonated with the uncertainty when it felt like the wind and the rain were against them and that they were scared for their life. I know that I have been scared over the last few months for the life of my family, the life of friends, the life of my congregation. I've been scared about I've been worried about the life of my daughter. I've been worried about loved ones who are in vulnerable situations. I've been scared for folks in the congregation who have been battling cancer, people who have had to face the grieving process of losing a loved one in a time of social distance. I know many of you are worried and scared and feel like you are in a storm-tossed sea and you don't know when it's going to end. You don't know when the boat's going to stop heaving, when children are going to be able to go back to school, when your job will be stable. There is a lot right now that makes me and might make you resonate with the storm. What is gospel to me in this day is that Jesus was there immediately for Peter, and that Jesus is there immediately for us. That there is no gap in space or time, that Christ is always pulling us out of the water, calling us to stillness and trust in God, calling us to lives, cruciform lives, of loving and serving neighbor. We are in a storm right now, but Jesus is the one who will get us out. Jesus says to his disciples, "You of little faith." And that might sound like an insult to me or to you. However, at other points in the gospel, he says that if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, which is surely a tiny thing, that you will be able to move mountains. He sends his disciples to cast out demons, to heal the sick, to proclaim his message. A little bit of faith can do amazing things. Right now, it feels like my faith is small, and it might feel that way for you. It feels like I only have a little bit. But it is worth remembering that faith is something that God nurtures and grows and does great things through. And so if you are someone of little faith, you are still a servant of God on a mission, on a voyage, on a journey with the one who stills the storm with a word. He is with you, and he will not let you drown. Amen.